Thanks for coming. This is my second talk of the day, and I've got one more to go. As Ted mentioned, I only briefly saw the English translation up there, was that he said that I'd served successive terms on the board. I've served 5 terms in total, and I've served 2, then I had a gap of a year, and then this is now my 3rd time again, so 5 total. So yeah, I'm sort of know what we're doing now. I certainly didn't my first term. So just who I am, there's a few people here that I don't know. I've been involved with the ASF for over a decade, almost 15 years now. I'm currently a board member, as I said. I've served 5 terms, and I'm also the VP of the incubator and assistant legal VP as well. But mostly what I do is I help out with incubating projects and review releases. I've been a mentor for more than 20 projects at the ASF. And my day job, I'm a community manager at DataStrata, where my next talk, I'm going to be talking about that project, which is an open source project called Apache Gravitino. And that will be 15 minutes after this talk. So just a very quick summary of how the governance at the ASF works. So we have a board of directors, and that board of directors governs the foundation. They set the strategic direction and deal with some issues that come up from time to time. In general, they take a very hands-off approach unless something goes wrong. And we let the project management committees govern their own projects. So the PMCs get to vote committers in and PMC members in. We don't interfere with that. They get to set the technical direction. The board almost never interferes with that. So, as I said, compared to some foundations, we're quite hands-off. There are also officers of the foundation, and they set policies that govern all the projects, and that direction and strategy is often set by the board. So that's about as simple as I can put it. The board itself, it consists of 9 members. And we have a yearly meeting, and at that yearly meeting, 2 things happen. One of them is that the ASF members propose new members, and they get voted in on that. Just out of interest here, who is an ASF member? I'm an ASF member. Ted is. That's about it. Okay. Who here is a committer or PMC member on a project? Yeah. Okay, there's a few hands. Yeah, I'm on like 20 projects. That's good to see. So if you get involved in the ASF itself, or you get more involved with multiple projects, you are likely to be voted in as an ASF member. For people who are not already in the membership, the process is probably a little bit opaque, but just like everything else at the ASF, the more you do, the more responsibility you're given. And the second thing that happens at those meetings is that the board members are voted in by the ASF members. So it's actually the ASF membership that votes in the board members. And this is quite unusual to a lot of other software foundations, such as the Linux Foundation, where you can basically pay to be on the board. So it operates in a very different way. Because it is yearly, and because it is a fair amount of work, I will say this up front, and it's a volunteer, unpaid position. It's probably about 10 to 40 hours a month that you would have to put in to do an effective job. Not everyone will do that, but I would, if you want to ever run for the board, think it's that sort of time commitment. We do get some turnover. We have a few long-term members who get voted in again and again and again. Sometimes they have some gap years, but there is some turnover there. So what does a board member actually do at the ASF? I've mentioned on a previous slide that they set the strategic direction of the foundation. But mostly what it's about is attending monthly board meetings, and before you attend those meetings, we have to review all the officer and project reports. So the main responsibility of the board is to provide oversight of all the projects to make sure that they are following the Apache way. And this is, I guess, some values the ASF has formed over time that what we think make good open source software. And we want to make sure that all our projects are doing that. Now, the way the oversight works is that the projects report quarterly, in most cases, and those reports need to be reviewed by the board, and I'll go through in detail what that process is in a few slides. The other thing that happens at board meetings is that we vote on resolutions, and this includes resolutions to appoint new projects, to retire projects, or other miscellaneous resolutions. As I mentioned, we have to deal with any other issues that occasionally arise. This is pretty rare, but it does occasionally happen. And this is not, it doesn't happen every year, but if there is a large turnover in the number of board members and we have a lot of new people, we'll actually organise a board face-to-face where we'll come together for a couple of days and maybe discuss in more detail some of the issues we're currently facing. We're not having one this year. We did have one the previous 2 years, and mostly that was because of the incoming CRA legislation in Europe, and we needed to do a lot of discussion and planning around that. So, as I said, the board meets every month, but most of that work is actually done outside of the board meeting. The board meetings themselves are actually quite efficient. So we have a total of 300 projects. We have 9 board members, and each project reports quarterly. So if you do the maths, that's about 10 projects per board member. And this is what happens, is that we have a role called a shepherd, and each shepherd gets assigned about 10 projects, and their job is to review those projects in detail. So they will look at the mailing lists, they'll look at their releases, they will look at how they voted in committers or PMC members. They will look at, you know, the GitHub repos and how things are committing and so forth like that. And they will check that the report that was submitted by the project matches what the reality is. We have some tooling that helps us for that. There's a Whimsy tool, which has a whole lot of sort of other tools in it, which makes this job easier. We currently have a tooling team that is working on a better tool for us for that. And we've actually run with that in the last 2 board meetings. But as you know, at the ASF, everything is archived on a public list or a private list in some cases. And that means that a board member can quite easily go through the last 4 months of email traffic and see what's been happening in a project. So what should be in a good report? Number 1, it needs to be accurate. Number 2, it should be written for an outsider. So if you're on the PMC here, the most common mistake I see is that reports contain a lot of technical detail about the project that to somebody outside the project means nothing. The other thing that poorer reports include statistics on their mailing site, say mailing lists or GitHub or whatever. And if they say we've had a 150% increase in commits over the last quarter, that sounds good, but Why did that happen? It's much better to put a reason in about why things happened than to just include these statistics. Because again, anyone outside the project that doesn't know it very well, it's going to be not so meaningful to them. So the best reports are community focused and talk about how the community is growing and what challenges the community has. The other thing that a report will do is list any issues for the board. And that means we'll probably take action on something, depending on what was asked. So this is the way that I normally do it. I know a few other directors do the same as what I do, but there's no set process here. I generally don't look at the reports first, and over the next couple of slides, I'll go into what my process is. So I'll first have a look at the project itself. I'll see how many contributors they have. I'll look at the GitHub traffic. I'll see how much commits they've got. I'll see if, say, people who are asking questions on the mailing list are not getting answered. You know, what I'm basically looking for is that there's activity there, the project is making releases, and that they're welcoming to people outside the project. I also look to see where conversations are happening. Hopefully they are happening mostly on the mailing list, but you know, the projects do have conversations in GitHub issues and in PRs, and sometimes external communication tools as well. The issue with those is that I don't always have access to them. So, for example, I can't use WeChat. So if a project has WeChat, I can't see that, so I don't know what's going on there. So I will check to make sure that basically there are two main things that I want to take away from this, and that is that there is a process of making decisions that are open and transparent, that are documented and archivable. So anyone else can come along and see why this decision was made or how it was made. And I'm also looking for that there is not any vendor issues in the project. So there's not a single vendor controlling the project, or there's not, you know, a two-tier system of all the committers come from one company, and it's very, very hard to get into with another company. I then usually look at releases and see that the releases and votes are done correctly. Sometimes, and I don't always do this, sometimes if I have time, I'll actually look at the release and do a thorough review, as I would with any incubating release, and see if it actually complies with ASF policy. And I make sure that the releases are put in the right place and voted on and things like that. 99% of cases they are. It's very rarely that an issue pops up here. And then I will take a look at the private list and see that new committers and PMC members are being voted in. There's some seats down here if you want to grab a seat, and a couple over there. And I just want to make sure that the information that is on the private list is what needs to be there, and it shouldn't be on the public list. And if new people are being voted in, is the committer bar there the same for everybody, and doesn't vary based on who you work for or who you are or what your title is or anything along those lines. We have recently improved the way that security issues are being handled, and the security team has a lot more power. But I generally look at security reports as well and make sure that they are being responded to. And the other thing I look for is to make sure that all, or most, it's almost never all, but most of the project management committee are actually signed up to the private list, so they know what's going on internally on the project. So then I go back and read the report. And I do this last because by going through all that information first, that gives me a perspective of what I think should be in the report. And if the report meets my expectations, then that's a good thing. So I also look to see whether anything is missing. I look to see whether it is accurate. And one of the things that we do at the ASF meeting is we will flag reports before the meeting, and those reports get flagged for discussion. That doesn't necessarily mean that the board's going to take action on the project. It just means, well, there's maybe something that we need to look into here, or in some cases it's just I should point this out to other directors and there's no action that needs to be taken. So when you flag a report, you can also add a comment, and those comments are preserved for future board members. The PMC can also get at them if they want to, but they should be taken generally as internal comments. And I do that for all the reports that I've been assigned to as a shepherd. And if I get time, which is about 50-50, I will go through the rest of the reports in the same manner, or as many as I can, or I'll just do a review of them, but not in quite as much detail. So you can see why it might take between 10 and 40 hours to get through all of these. You have a large number of reports. There's almost 80 or 90 reports every board meeting every month, and 10 of those you're assigned, or so you're assigned a shepherd as. So board meetings themselves. Now, the first thing I'd say about board meetings is that time zones are hard. We've got board members from all over the world, and unfortunately, if you're in Asia and Australia, and you have other people where you have to have a meeting with, and they're in Europe and the US, that either means it's very early for you or very late for you. That's the way that it turns out. There's nothing that can be done about that. As I said, the meetings are actually very effective and quick. They usually only take an hour. Sometimes they take an hour and a half. Rarely they've taken 2 hours. And that is because most of the work is actually done outside the meeting, before the meeting. So I think it actually runs really effectively in those regards. So any of the reports that have enough pre-approvals just get automatically approved. And any flag reports we'll discuss, and there may be some action items that come out of those flagged reports. So there will be something for a director to follow up with a project within the next month, or maybe some other action item that they need to do. And then finally, we'll vote on any resolutions, which includes retirement and graduation of projects. We've had a few recent changes. We've had, there's a new board reporting experiment going on, which uses a different format. A lot of the things that we ask projects for are basically statistics about the community, and we would actually prefer they give us more commentary on the community health than those statistics, because we should be able to generate those automatically. So this is what this board reporting experiment is trying to do. I think it's progressing well, but we'll see at the end of the experiment to see whether we adopt it for all projects or not. I have been working on some board onboarding material. So we now have a new board member onboarding document, a whole set of slides, and an online course. So anyone who wants to be a board member or is interested in how the board runs, they would be a good resource to have a look at. The new tooling group that we've got as well is also working on a new board meeting tool. And as I said, that's been used in the last couple of board meetings. So, why should you become an ASF board member? You can find out how the ASF operates, and it's actually quite interesting. The biggest thing I got out of it in the first time that I was a board member was it will totally expand your views on what an ASF project is and how they operate. Lots of ASF projects are very different from each other. While they have the same core set of principles that they adhere to, the day-to-day operations and how they work are often quite different. And that's a good thing. You'll certainly learn a lot and gain valuable skills. And the reason why I was doing it is because I like the mission of the ASF and its values. And the ASF had helped me in my career indirectly. I had worked with some open source software projects, and that was my day job. And so it's a chance to actually give back to the ASF and do something valuable for the community as a whole. So if you want to get involved, I have some suggestions. You can go have a look at that onboarding material that's recently been created. You can actually, if you are an ASF member, come along to a board member meeting and just see how they run and what goes on in them. If you're not an ASF member, you can get an ASF member to invite you as a guest, and you can do that. You can also ask to shadow a board member, and they will show you what they actually do in their job, and you'll learn a lot from that. So I hope to see some people in this room in the future actually run to be a board member at the ASF. And that's it from me, and we'll open up to questions if we have time. As we started early, I'm pretty sure we've got lots of time.
The previous 3 sessions run faster than I expected. 大家有什么问题吗? Anybody any question? Okay.
Yeah.
So what would be the minimum qualifications for a candidate who would be seriously considered for joining the board?
There are none. Seriously. I'm being a bit frivolous there. Like, to be a board member, you have to be voted in by the ASF members. And when you're being voted in, each candidate will put out a statement, and obviously those statements get compared to the other candidates. So, you have to stand out in a field of, sometimes it's only 10 people, but it would be between 10 and 20 that get nominated. You can also self-nominate. There's no issue with that. There's no restriction on don't have to be an ASF member, but just because of the practicalities of being a board member, it has been that I think every single board member has been an ASF member. But that doesn't mean there can't be someone who does that first. You just have to be passionate, show up, have a vision that aligns with what the ASF does, and you might get asked a few awkward questions about, what do you think about the ASF branding and how that's going to change, for example, or, what do you think about having a code of conduct that applies to all spaces at the ASF? But as long as you've had some decent experience in open source and been at the ASF for some time, I think you've got a reasonable chance of getting in. Maybe not the first time, but once you get known, it wouldn't be impossible. Thanks for the question. Any other questions?
Thank you for the talk. It's very amazing. And I'm a researcher, very interested in open source. I have a question about the reports. Yep. Because I ever have a look at the mailing list. I found there's also a section for the incubator programs, right? But I see that there's great variance about the details and what kind of information you will provide about the reports compared with the formal project ASF. So I really want to know. So for incubator programs and for those graduated programs or leading programs, do you have different expectations about what kind of information you should provide? And especially because I'm interested in the leadership topic, so I really want to know how do you need to report details on how you select those PMC members or committee in those mailing lists.
All right, I'll start. I think there's a couple of questions there, but I'll start with the first one on the variation in quality of the reports. You've asked the right person, because as well as being a board member, I'm the VP of the Apache Incubator. So thank you for that. Because incubating projects are just starting out and they don't really know, in some cases, what they're doing, and they vary a lot in quality. Some incubating projects know open source well because they came from an open source environment. Some incubating projects may be new to open source. So the quality of the incubator reports are going to vary a lot, and a lot of it will depend on the guidance that the mentors give them. Once they become a top-level project, we do expect like a minimum bar of quality, but sometimes you'll see that the top-level reports vary in quality as well. In fact, in a few cases, you'll see some reports that are boilerplate exactly the same as the previous quarter. In some cases, you'll see reports that are obviously machine-generated, AI-generated. We don't particularly like that, but it happens.
Yeah, thank you for this. But related to this, I also noticed that, especially for the recent projects, many discussions did not happen in the mailing list, but in other places like GitHub. So
yeah, having discussions in GitHub is probably fine, as long as some of that is mirrored back to the mailing list, either automatically or at least if there's a decision to be made, the decision that discussion should be brought back to the mailing list and made there. And the reason why that should happen is that decisions at the ASF need to be open, and they need to be transparent, and they need to be archivable. And if it's on ASF infrastructure, we're going to have that forever. If it's on GitHub, we may not have that forever. GitHub, I don't know, in 5, 10, 20 years could disappear. It's like, you know, you might not think of it disappearing, like it's very popular and everyone uses it, but I can think of half a dozen other code platforms that used to exist that don't exist anymore.